Welcome to Resistingbeta, the men's health podcast. And now, your host, Andrew Bontz. All right, men, welcome to another episode of the Resistingbeta podcast. I am Andrew Bontz, and I have the pleasure of being your host today. And this guest is someone that I'm very excited about having here. He's introduced to me from a very close friend of mine. I've had the privilege of talking to Aaron for the episode here, and you, my friends, are in for a treat. So, what are some of the questions that I have as I've prepared for this episode that I think that you might too? So, what are the core pillars of consistent success and fulfillment? And one thing you learn about Aaron is he has a mastermind. So why do men thrive in masterminds? Or why do many men decide to go it alone and maybe not choose that route of a mastermind or a strategic brotherhood? How do you build holistic resiliency to weather all the seasons of your life, through tragedy, through success, through the suck, all the way up to the great times of life? And one that's really cool to me is, how do we eliminate the kind of the scarce money mindset? And how can we move past a certain thing that's blocking us? So a little bit about our guest. His name's Aaron Walker. He's the founder of the Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind and the founder of View from the Top. Also has a podcast that's called View from the Top. And Aaron's mission is to help men transform their lives. And his leading core value, relationships matter most, serves as the compass to uncover what they truly want in life and set their goals to achieve success and significance on their journey. And Aaron has a laundry list of accolades over his multiple decades of success in business, owned 14 businesses, is in a mastermind with Dave Ramsey and several other really notable people in Nashville. So Aaron, I really appreciate you being here.
Andy, man, I don't know if I can measure up, buddy, to all those introductions, but I think we're going to have a good time today. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here. So I think your story, especially when you hit tragedy in your life, really spoke to me when I've heard you tell it, and I've heard you on other podcast episodes. So I think it'd be helpful for men to connect to you. Just the short version. I know you're a humble guy. You have a hard time talking about yourself, but I think that the background is important here. So can you give us a little snippet?
I'll give you the Reader's Digest version just for a second. It's hard to cover 62 years, in a couple of minutes, but we'll do best we can. No comments about the Southern drawl. Okay, so I hear that enough. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. I love Nashville. We're 3 generations deep here. Grew up a pretty poor kid. Got an opportunity when I was 18 to start my first business, and I met a couple of guys that owned the 21st largest insurance agency in the country. And I approached them for funding, and they agreed. And so we went on a 3-way venture. And when I was 27, we sold that to a Fortune 500. It was pretty cool going from broker than a convict to being able to retire at 27. I say that with great amount of humility. I thought it was going to be amazing, and it was for about 18 months. I was getting in the bed in the middle of the day and gained 50 pounds. And my wife said to me one day at noon, she said, "This is not what I signed up for. You need to start another business, buy another business." So I did. We grew that company about 4 times the size it was when I bought it, and really worked hard on that. So I was 40 by this time. And I was headed to the office on August 1st, 2001, Andy, and ran over and killed a pedestrian. And it really rocked me, needless to say, to the core. And took a sabbatical. After that, I sold the business that I owned at that time and took the next 5 years off. I didn't do anything. We traveled and got my feet back under me. And then we went in the construction business about 5 years after that, high-end residence, small commercial properties, and did that for a number of years. And then when I turned 50, 12 years ago, I retired. I said, there was multiple businesses all along the way, but I said, I've had enough. And I went to the mastermind group that you referenced earlier. It was called the Eagles here in Nashville. Dave Ramsey and Dan Miller and Ron Doyle, a couple of guys had started that, and they invited me to join. And We'd been meeting for years and years. They really knew me, knew who I was. And they said, hey, you're too young to retire. You need to start coaching some other guys. And so I pushed back on that, Andy. I didn't really want to do that at first, but after I started doing it and seeing these young guys accomplish their aspirational goals, it gave a new, renewed motivation to me, and started doing podcast interviews, telling my story. And fast forward, here we are 12 years later. I'll be 62 next month, and we have 150 men. We're in 5 different countries around the world now, and we're helping small groups. They're groups of 10. We're helping these guys transform their life. And so I'm probably having more fun today than I've ever had in my entire career. So married 43 years, 2 adult daughters and 5 grandchildren. So life is really good for me right now.
So much to unpack there. So one of the things that I was really curious about is what do you attribute all the success and the consistency to? Because it seems like you've grown and succeeded from a young age at 18 to today. I mean, what are your core pillars of success, and how do you pass that on to the men that you've met in your life?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we could spend multiple episodes on that one question, but I'll try to succinctly lay it out. So I didn't talk about some of the failures that I'd had in business along the way too. There was a number of companies that we started that didn't succeed, and nobody likes to talk about those, but I tell it because it's the reality of it. A lot of guys will start a business and it'll fail, and they'll say, oh, hey, I'm not successful like Big A or some of those other guys. And just know along the way that you swing enough, you're going to strike out a few times. And so I had numbers of companies that didn't do well, and we closed them. And so I want to throw that in there also for context. When I was a kid, my mom had a slogan. She would say, can't, couldn't do it, and could did it all. And Andy, I hated that slogan when I was a kid. My mom would say it all the time. The truth is I've adopted that as my life mantra, is that I don't believe I can't, I believe I can. And if you put forth the consistent effort, a lot of determination, you're willing to put relationships matter most first. And that's what we've done in every business that we've had. People only remember how you make them feel, right? And we're always trying to make the sale. And I teach people every single day, stop trying to make the sale and continue to add value. And the more you add value, the more people are going to want to be around, the more people are going to see that you're the real deal, that you're trying to help them accomplish their goals, their dreams, what it is that they want. And you're always looking for value stack. You're always looking for add-ons. You're always looking for ways to transform the lives of other people. And they'll buy your product, right? Whether it's a service, whether it's a widget. So I'll just have to say the consistency is another thing. I've been very consistent throughout my adult life. It doesn't come easy. Matter of fact, it's pretty difficult, and it's the consistency. Dan Miller is a good friend of mine. We've been friends for 30 years. He's got 48 Days to the Work You Love, and he's got 48 Days podcast. And I was talking to him recently, and he said, out of the hundreds of episodes I've had, do you know how many Fridays I've missed? And I said, knowing you, not many. And he said, never. And then talking to Dave Ramsey, almost 30 years now doing his radio show, he said, you know how many days we've missed? 0. And I'm like, it's that consistency. And that's the people that I've been around, my adult life. And so hearing these guys say, we can't stop, we've got to keep on, even when it's hard. And it's not always fun. Like, I love doing these interviews, but sometimes I don't feel like doing these interviews, right? But I do them anyway because they're effective. They help transform lives. And so for me, it's just having that determination, having that grit, having that perseverance, having that mindset of, I can do this, and never allowing the upper limit challenge, the glass ceiling, get in the way and saying you can't. And so I always say, stand over there and watch, you're fixing to see it happen. And I think just having confidence, void of arrogance, is in your corner, because we have to believe in ourselves. And I don't believe we need to be condemning or judgmental, but we need to have a sense of confidence. And so you couple those things together, there's not much will stand in your way.
Where do you attribute that confidence? Where does it come from? Because I think there's so many men that struggle with confidence in
Yeah.
today's world, especially
Yeah.
after an identity change or
Sure.
after you kind of get brought to your knees by life. I
Yeah.
mean, how do you maintain that
Yeah.
in all seasons in
Sure.
your life?
Yeah. It's difficult. It's not easy. So hopefully I can make it through this story because it's an emotional story. But I remember at 7 years old during the winter, watching my dad was a general contractor, and I watched my dad climb up on a roof that had snowed recently, and he swept the snow off of the roof with a broom. And then he tore the roof off and re-roofed the house during the middle of winter so that he'd have enough money to buy us food. And I'm like, something happened in me that day. I don't know what it was exactly, but I was like, my dad had the determination, the perseverance to provide for his family, regardless of what the cost was. I adopted that same mindset for my family. And I said, I'm going to do whatever it takes in order to provide for my family. I'm going to have that resiliency. I'm going to have that determination. The other thing is, quite honestly, I wanted to do well because I didn't want to have to work that hard physically, right? So it wasn't that I was running to something, I was running from something. It was like, I don't want to have to do that. And God has blessed us immeasurably. We've had some tragedies, but I've chosen to not let it get me down. It's the same as happiness. People are talking about happiness. I'll be glad when I become happy. Happiness is a choice, it's not a trait. We choose to be happy and we choose to overcome obstacles in our life, even with the business closures. We went through a bankruptcy when I was a child. My dad lost everything. We had to move in with my cousin. It was embarrassing, but it was like, hey, it's the hand we're dealt and we've got to deal with it. I didn't go to college. That was always an obstacle for me. It was like, hey, what do I know? And my buddies say, you could teach the college courses. You don't have the diploma from college, but you've had real life experiences. And so just adopting within yourself that you've got value to add, that you can help other people, that you can choose to do the right thing. And it's just a choice. And people today, no disrespect to those that are listening that have this, but I don't subscribe to the victim mindset at all. Matter of fact, my second core value is no excuses. I hate excuses, and everybody's got one. They're like, well, I wasn't dealt a hand, or listen, I came from a very, very broke family. I didn't have any money, and I opened my first business when I was 18 years old. And you're like, man, how did you do that? You know how I did it? I gave up 2/3 of the business. I put the sweat equity in. Robin and I got married 2 weeks out of high school. So I sat her down one day and I said, Robin, you were broker than I was as a child, and we're going to make something of ourselves. We're going to delay gratification. We're not going to buy the big house, the fancy car. We're going to pour all the money back in our business. So I borrowed $150,000 in the 70s to go in business when I was 18. I didn't have any money, and they gave me a 10-year loan. I paid it off in 36 months because we didn't increase our lifestyle. I delayed gratification so later I could live like no one else. And we took an $18,000 salary for 9 years. We had 2 little girls, and we just made do. And then we were able to repeat that exercise numbers of times. And I built a business that a Fortune 500 wanted, and we were able to sell out. I couldn't have done that if I had continued to increase my lifestyle. If I had, every time I made a little bit more money, I bought a bigger car or nicer house. Today, we're able to enjoy some of the nicer things because we did delay that gratification. So I think if you put your mindset in the right, anyone listening to me doesn't have an obstacle that they can't overcome.
So, how has being in a mastermind, as long as you have, helped you with that consistency and through
Yeah.
those times where you have that voice screaming inside of you that it's
Yeah.
too hard, or that victim is screaming at you of
Yeah.
it's not fair, or
Yeah.
or take a break, or
Sure.
why do you keep working so hard? How has the mastermind benefited you through that stuff?
Yeah. Well, you said something I want to say before I answer the question. You said that's not fair. Life is not fair. At the end of the day, we're dealt hands sometimes that maybe we don't deserve, but it's the cards you're dealt. And so what are you going to do? You're going to lay there and be a victim, or are you going to stand up and say, in spite of my circumstances? Eric Weineminer is an acquaintance of mine. We're not running around friends, but Eric has summited the highest peak on 7 continents, and he's blind. He traversed the Colorado River alone in a kayak, 270 miles. And I interviewed him a couple of times. And I said, man, how did you do that? I couldn't even I can see and I couldn't do that. He scaled a wall with a man on his back. He used his legs and that man's eyes. And I'm like, that's overcoming obstacles, right? To summit. He's the only guy that's blind that's ever done Mount Kilimanjaro. The most fit athletes in the world can't summit Mount Kilimanjaro. And he did it blind. And it's like, where did that come from? Where did that determination come from? And I'm looking at people every day and going, I don't understand why you just lay there and go, well, my dad was mean to me, or my mom didn't give me the chance. And, I came from an alcoholic family. And, it's like, okay, well, so is that going to define you? Are you going to adopt those things and create an environment for you and your family that you're not willing to shake off and go, hey, it's just what I was dealt. And so I'm going to go out and make the best of it. And I can give you countless examples of people that have done that. But the difference between them and some of the people listening today is those people made the choice. They decided they were not going to let it define them. And that's been my mindset my entire career. Being in the mastermind is no doubt one of the best things I've ever done in my entire life, because we don't have the gumption to go it alone. We don't have the stamina. You have willpower, but that's an inexhaustible resource. God created us to be in community. Isolation is the enemy of excellence. And if you want to go further, go with a tribe. If you want to go fast, go alone. The thing that keeps people from joining is the facade. It's the fakeness. It's the lack of authenticity. It's the lack of vulnerability. It's the lack of transparency, because you want everybody to think you've got it figured out. It's the guy with a big hat and no cattle, right? And that's what people are up against. You lay in bed at night and talk to your spouse. I don't know how we're going to do this, or pay the mortgage, or pay the car note, or how to send the kids to that private school. I don't know what I'm going to do, but you're too proud to let that veil down and let other people in that are competent, that are capable, that are unbiased, to reveal to them your current status, to give them context of where you're at and point you in the right direction. And I just made a choice a long time ago that I had rather be embarrassed in front of 10 people as to not fulfill the promises and the dreams and the visions that's available for me. And so for me, yeah, is it embarrassing? Absolutely. You go in there and you're like, yeah, I don't know whether to turn right or left. I don't know which fork in the road to take. I don't have the resources to do this. I don't have the skill set in order to do this. Would you introduce me to somebody? Would you point me to a resource? Would you help me understand this? Would you teach me how to do this? Would you hold me accountable to doing these things consistently for a period of time? Would you walk along that journey and hold my arms when I'm tired and I no longer have the strength and the energy? I'm willing to subject myself to that scrutiny so that I can have a successful and significant life. And when you get to the point of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, you too will lower that veil and offer yourself in an environment with trusted advisors to help you walk the journey.
I mean, I really appreciate that, because it's basically just taking your ego, setting it aside, taking your fear of judgment, or I think a lot of men struggle with not being enough. Like they feel like they're never enough. And that fear makes them hold the true thing blocking them from their greatness inside, because they don't want to be ridiculed or teased or felt like,
you know where that comes from, Andy? You know what the underlying problem is there? We feel inadequate.
Mm-hmm.
And the underlying theme in inadequacy is shame.
Right.
We don't want to feel the shame.
Mm.
And so, therefore, if we don't share, we don't feel inadequate and we dodge the shame. And you never accomplish your goals and dreams. You never arrive at a place that you maximize your potential.
Mm.
If you look at the greatest athletes on the planet, they have mentors, they have coaches, they have groups. They're not going it alone. There's nobody a self-made man.
Right.
Nobody. And so once we get to that realization, we allow ourselves not to feel the inadequacy, but more adequate. And so therefore we dodge the shame even faster.
Mm.
And so get trusted advisors around you that have nothing to gain or lose, that you're willing to subject yourself to their scrutiny. You want to get somebody that has similar worldviews. You want to have somebody that is in alignment with your core values. And those are the people that you want to take advice from.
Mm. Because I think that fear of rejection or that judgment of someone else to where you lay your shame out and they cast you aside. I think that fear would prevent men from, they would make up a bunch of excuses and stories and narratives in their head to prevent them from the actual true best version of themselves they could become if they took that leap, if they put that shame out there. And I think there's safety there. It's seeking out that, and I think you're right, or the core values and someone who meets you where you're at versus someone you might not necessarily gel with, right? So I think creating that atmosphere of safety and atmosphere of authenticity and just choosing the right one and just trying it, right?
Yeah, here's the thing. You talked about people casting you aside. If they're willing not to walk along and have that camaraderie and that experience and iron sharpening iron, if they're willing to have condemnation or be judgmental and cast you aside, is that the person you want to do life with to begin with?
Right.
Not me. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be around those people. I want to be around people that's got my back. I want to be around people that don't look down on you. I want to be around people that they're willing to be vulnerable and transparent. And so we can lock arms and we can go through this thing together. That's who I want. And if I've got a fear that they're going to cast me aside, I'm not going to invest time with those people to begin with.
Hmm. So where do you see some masterminds go wrong? Like when,
good question.
The thing seems like there's a lot of businesses and people that are creating these masterminds and charging a lot for it.
Sure.
And making that leap is uncomfortable, right? But what do you see is different from the masterminds you've been a part of, and maybe some of the horror stories that you've heard of?
I don't know necessarily that I can quantify one being wrong and the other being right, but I'll say the different. Mm. So for me, when I was 35 years old, I came home with a pocket full of money to a house full of strangers. Mm. And my wife came up and said, "Thank you for our beautiful home. We have a place on the beach. We have fancy cars, but I feel like I'm a single parent."
Oh.
And man, it just ripped my heart out. Mm. I was like, man, we went from nothing to being able to live like a lot of people will never experience. And I was very offended and hurt simultaneously. And I went to Robin and I said, like, I got to work a lot of hours to provide this. And she said, well, I'd rather not have it then. Hmm. If we're not going to be a family unit, if you're going to offer us on the altar of more tangible possessions and I don't have you to experience it with, I'd rather not have it. Hmm. And so we had to develop some boundaries and some guidelines. And so when I retired 12 years ago, and I did start thinking through coaching and I did start thinking through leading these mastermind groups, I said that it's going to have a 3-pronged approach. I can teach you to make money. It's not that hard to make money, but there's going to be some relational cost associated with that if you don't have the proper guardrails. Mm-hmm. And so I said, so what we're going to do is focus on personal, professional, and spiritual development. So it's a three-pronged tool. I'm Christian by faith, and so my faith to me is very important. That's first and foremost. That's my primary concern. The second is the personal development. I want to be sure that I'm the man I was called to be. I want to be the husband. I want to be the dad. And I didn't have that in focus in the early years. All I wanted was bigger, better, shinier, faster, right? Just give me more. And then it's like the dog that caught the car. Once I got it, it didn't scratch the itch like I thought it was going to. I was like, this is it? Like this is it? It didn't give me the satisfaction. Now, don't hear me wrong. I hate it when people with money go, money's not important. I want to go, you're a liar. It's real important. Let's take it away from you and see how important it is. But don't make it your God. Don't make it your focal point. Don't make it the only reason, right? There again, like I like a nice house. I have one. I like a nice boat. Just bought a brand new boat. It was actually a year and a half old. It's like brand new, but it's a boat I've been wanting for a long time, right? I got a nice car. I've got the stuff, but money is a tool to live our life as a family, right? It's not something that we go out here and just aspire to accomplish for our own greater good. And so when I started the mastermind, I said, we're going to focus about 60% of our time on the professional development, about 30% of our time on the personal development, and about 10% of our time on the spiritual. Now, it varies, right? Depending on the season and what's going on in these men's lives. But if you're not shored up in one of those areas, something's going to break eventually. And so I think where a lot of masterminds fall short is they just teach you to make money. Then you go out here and you don't have boundaries. You don't have the guardrails. You've offered your family up as a sacrifice because you're working too many hours and you're not living a balanced life. And so just be mindful. The other thing that I think a lot of, excuse me, Andy, a lot of the things that I think that we do is we try to give advice to people we don't know. Recently, I went to Starbucks to have lunch with a buddy, and I said, hey, Robin and I are thinking about buying a condo down in South Florida. And I'm just curious. You're a savvy businessman. I'm curious to what you think about doing that. I live in Nashville. As I get older, it's a little colder in the winters, it feels like. And Robin's been wanting to be down there on the beach. What do you think about that? And he said, yeah, Big A, what part? And I told him. And he said, man, I think that'd be awesome. I said, you think I should do it? And he goes, yeah, I think you should do it. And I said, this condo's $1 million. And he said, no, I think that'll be good. And I was setting him up, Andy, to be honest with you. And then he said, yeah, I think you should. And I said, well, let's go back and visit your suggestion. He said, okay. I said, first of all, you've never met Robin. You've never met my girls or my grandkids. You don't know my vision. You don't know my abilities. You don't know my superpowers. You don't know my kryptonite. You don't know my blind spots. And you sure don't know anything about my finances. And he said, no, I don't. I said, you really can't help me, can you? And he said, no, I really can't. See, here's what we do every day. In whatever scenario you're in, you do that every day by asking people for advice, and they have no context. Mm-hmm. So in our mastermind, you metaphorically unrobe. We know everything about you. We know all about your family. We know about your vision because we help you create it. We know about your propensity. We know about your superpowers. We know your blind spots. We know your finances, because I can't give you advice financially if I don't know where you're at. Once the men in the group have that context, then they can give you advice that's applicable to you. Otherwise, they can't. But here's what we do. We get all excited. We go to these multi-$1,000 masterminds, and we get emotional, and we stand around a fire with a name tag on. You don't even know the names or the people that are there. You don't have any idea what they've done in the past. And you spill your guts, and they tell you what you should do, and you go home and you implement it, and it doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work because it doesn't apply to you, because you didn't have the time or the effort. You didn't take the bandwidth to give them the context, and you just took the advice. And that's what I think people do wrong. I think that they've got to be very cautious. They got to be very careful, and it takes time. You've got to do the reps week after week, month after month, year after year. People have to walk the journey with you in order to give you good advice. I was in the Eagles group. We don't meet any longer, but everyone's kind of retired and they've gone on their way and they're taking it easy. But for a dozen years, and men there know me. I don't have to give them context. I can go in and say, I've got this situation with Robin. I don't know what to do. I've got this kid that's doing this, or this grandkid, or this business thing. And people will say quickly, Big A, how's that going to help you get to your vision? Because you said that these are the things that you want. And you're like, you're right. I'm chasing the shiny object. And see, when you meet with people week after week, month after month, and year after year that have that information, that is invaluable for you to take your life to the next level.
Mhm.
So yeah, 25 years. Yeah, I've been in a mastermind group every week, and it's aided to my success.
So I think you finished there with a key point that I think many men are missing. And I see it, especially from a lot of the single men that I've met or men that have gone through a divorce, is that vision or mission, number one, isn't holistic, or two, they just don't have one. They don't have something that they're reaching towards. They don't have necessarily that core driving them that isn't just, I have a job, so therefore my mission is my company's mission, or my mission is this. So it causes like almost like a wandering concept where
Sure.
many men are just wandering, right? They're just trying to stay in comfort, avoid fear, avoid rocking the boat, doing whatever their wife says they should do, or girlfriend, or mom, and just letting the world lead them aimlessly. And I speak from personal experience that that's who I was for probably the first 35 years, if not a little bit longer in my life. And it wasn't until discovering that mission and one, being comfortable with my authentic self, stop trying to be the chameleon that makes everybody else happy because you just want to be validated by everyone else around you, right? And having that for the first time in my life, for really the last, I don't know, 2 years, where I'm like, I actually have a mission. I actually have core values that drive me, that I filter through, and I know my line in the sand. So I just really appreciate you diving into that at the level that you have.
I think there are three things, Andy, that we all need, and you've already touched on them a little bit. I want to reiterate. First of all, we have to have a vision, and it can't just be in our head. That's just a dream. They say that a vision without a plan is hallucination. And so we need a written plan in order to accomplish our vision. The next thing that we need is a mission statement. Well, we need to know why that we're trying to accomplish the things that we're trying to accomplish. And then thirdly is our core values. The core values is the filter. And for me, quickly, I'll go over them. The first one is relationships matter most. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. If I'm selling a widget or providing a service, the relationships matter most, always, every business I've ever owned. The second one is no excuses. I hate excuses. Just own it. Don't blame it on your daddy. Don't blame it on your mama. Don't blame it on, the government. Don't blame it on religion. Just own it. Just say, no excuses. I'm not going to offer any excuses. The third thing is make it amazing. Like if you can't do it to the best of your abilities, I want you to squeeze every drop out of the towel. I want you to leave it all on the field. When you lay down in bed at night, I want you to go, you know what? I gave it everything I had. That doesn't mean it's amazing, but it's as amazing as you know how currently. Fourth is everything is figure outable. Like, I don't know. My team knows not to ever say to me, we can't do it. I'm like, yeah, we're going to figure it out. And then finally, and I touched on this earlier, it's truth before opinion. And for me, I find truth in God's word. There's 66 books. I run it through God's word, and then your opinion matters to me. So I find my identity in Christ, not in my tangible possessions, not in my title. I find my personal identity in Christ. And then everything I do is run through that filter. And then if it doesn't align with that filter, we don't do it.
Man, it feels so focused. And I wonder, like, when did you start this, the clarity of this vision. And as you work with men, how does this evolve? And what's the process of the level of clarity that you've reached? Where it's easy to listen to someone like you and be like, wow, like I don't have that level of clarity. So maybe he's just extra special and I'm just not. And
No, it's a lot of work, right? You know what I'm saying? It's not easy. But I'll tell you one of the things that is probably one of the most beneficial things, and it sounds simple, but the vast majority of people don't know what they want.
Mm.
And you're like, yeah, sure I do. No, when you start diving in and you start really asking the questions of what it is that you want, most people don't know. Robin and I live a very proactive life, not reactive. We're very proactive. Like, I know how much money I want to make. I know where I want to live. I know the amount I want to give away. I know what my number one goal that I need to accomplish in the next 30 days is, because I do 3 big rocks every quarter and we focus on that. And we use the 12-week year, Brian Moran's strategy, to keep us on task in order to complete the task daily to reach the goal. I think about how my life would be radically different if this next big thing happened over the next 12 months. And I focus on that. I think about the big obstacles that's holding me back from pursuing my dreams, and I eliminate those obstacles. There's a lot of you've got friends today you need to get rid of. Like, you can't get rid of your family, but you can choose your friends. And then I think about the personal development that I do each and every day that can help move me closer to my goals. And so we very clearly are trying to focus intently on the next right thing to do. Most people focus on the goal, right? They don't focus on the task. And when you start focusing on the task, the goal will take care of itself. But the first thing you've got to do is get really, really clear on what it is that you want. I could have a much bigger house than I have. I could have went and bought a brand new boat. I bought one a year old because it's what I wanted. It wasn't what people think I should buy, right? I have a 2,700 square foot house back in the woods on 8 acres. I don't have any neighbors. I could go up to Fairview Plantation 5 miles from here and buy one of those mega houses on the lake. I don't want the neighbors. No disrespect, but I want to be in the woods, right? And so that's what I want. And a lot of people are like, Big A, you had that big old house, you sold it and you bought. Yeah, you know why? Because that's what I want. And so you've got to determine in your own life what that is. Once you understand what it is that you want, then you can figure out a plan to achieve it.
I think like having taking that step of going after what you want and having that almost like a positive, selfish intent of being okay. This is what I want, and that's okay. And celebrating that and just really going after it. Because I think that's one thing to where I see a lot of men when they're struggling in their marriage, they struggle to lead in their marriage. Or at first they struggle to lead themselves, because this is where I screwed up. I struggled to lead myself. And then I wasn't able to lead in my marriage. And then my businesses were okay, and I did okay, top quartile type stuff, but all came back to me, right? So that's something I really appreciate about just like a really positive masculine presence that you have, and that starting with that self-leadership and just allowing that ripple effect just into your marriage, into your business, into the relationships that you carry outwardly beyond that. And I think that's just something that a lot of men, especially probably in their 20s and 30s, are missing.
Yeah, they're letting the tail wag the dog. And it's not, I don't look at it as selfish.
Right.
I interviewed Lee Cockrell recently. I've interviewed him a number of times. He was the VP at Disney. He ran about 5 of their theme parks. And he said, you've got to take care of yourself first. He said, he's 83 years old. He said, I go to the gym 7 days a week. He said, I'm the same size I was when I graduated from college.
Mm.
And he said that if you don't take care of yourself, how can you take care of your family? And so that's through personal development. That's through professional development. That's through spiritual development. That's through taking care of yourself physically. We've got to maintain ourselves in order to take care of our families. And so I don't look at it as being selfish. I look at it as being a good steward over the resources that we've been given to manage. And so I think we have a responsibility.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've really struggled with the last almost of my life is the first off watching my dad prioritize his career where he wasn't necessarily around a ton. He was around, but he was working, and his value he brought to the family was he made the money and wasn't present in a lot of other ways, right? So
right.
what I did is my pendulum was swung the complete other way, right? Where I prioritized being a dad over my marriage at the time and over my businesses and my professional life and that kind of stuff. And I still to this day catch myself doing that, where I've swung the pendulum so far to being a great dad that I sacrificed. I don't put myself first. I don't put my mission first, right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering where that swing is. Like, what's the healthy swing of that?
Yeah, I can
right?
help you. I can help you get there. So Roy Vaden is a friend of mine, lives here in Nashville. He wrote a book called Procrastinate on Purpose. And in this book, he said it's a myth. There's not a such thing as work-life balance. He said we need to prioritize our priorities. We need to really determine what is most important. And he goes, historically, it's about 5 things. And we need to spend an inordinate amount of time on those 5 things. See, what we try to do is we're an inch deep and a mile wide. We're chasing all these shiny objects. Give me more, bigger, better, shinier, faster. Let me have another, resource to have more income. I'd rather be an inch wide and a mile deep. And then I'm going to really be a specialist. It's kind of like the heart surgeon. He's not a podiatrist also. If he was, I'd be like, get me another heart surgeon. I don't want somebody working on my heart and my feet. I want the guy that knows the most. That's why they're all wealthy. They have narrowed their focus. That's where we miss it. So for me, I already said my relationship with Christ was paramount. That's why I spend the first hour and a half every morning reading, praying, listening to praise and worship, scripture, meditating. That's important to me. Nothing gets in the way of that. I do that every morning. I've been doing that for decades. The next thing is my wife, right? She's more important than the business. I had that backwards. I had to go make the money and bring it home. And then Robin felt like she was a single mom. And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to allocate the amount of hours that I'm willing to spend. I've never worked for anybody since I was 18. I'm 62 now. I've worked for myself. So I get to choose these things. Some people, may not get to choose. And that's the path you've chosen. And that's the path you're on. But for me, I said, I'm going to work this many hours. Today, now, at this spot in my life, I've got a great team. I work 24 hours a week. I work 4 days a week, 6 hours a day. And that's all I'm working. Could I make more? Yes. Could I see more clients, have more masterminds? Yes. All those things. Yes, I could. But I'm not going to. I've set the boundaries up. There's parameters that I'm living my life by. Same way with children. There's no fails. There's things. I've got a buddy of mine that's a speaker. He travels all over the world speaking, or all over the U.S. He speaks to 5,000, 10,000 people at a time. And recently we were in what we call the summit. We do a summit where we invite 8 men and they come and we dive deep into a personal situation. He said, I missed my little girl's birthday. And he goes, I can't miss my little girl's birthday. She's 12 years old. I ain't got that many more. And so this guy makes a lot of money annually. And we were trying to solve his problem. He said, I guess I'm just going to have to give it up. And one of the mastermind guys in the room said, no, you don't have to give it up. He said, you need to buy a jet. He goes, what? He goes, that's an easy solve. You get up early, you fly to the event, and you're home before dinner, and you don't miss your little girl's birthday. Do you know that's what he's doing? He's like, it didn't even dawn on me. because he's gone 2 or 3 days at a time. Now, that's an exaggerated example of what I'm talking about, but it works for him. So I don't know what that is for you, the people that are listening to this interview right now, but you've got to decide where you're going to spend your time. There's only so much of it, right? We can make more money, but we can't manufacture more time. And so you've got to build the parameters. You've got to build the schedule and say, I'm willing to allocate this much time, and pray that God blesses that amount of effort. Because here's the thing, for me personally, God is not the author of confusion. He's created me to live life in its entirety. This is not a trial run that we're doing right now. Like, this is it, right? We're living our life right now, and we need to make the best of it. So prioritize your priorities, pick the 5 top areas, build the boundaries, build a schedule, and focus on those, and you'll have a level 3 tiered prong. It will be absolutely the best life you could possibly live. But when we get out of focus and we spend an inordinate amount of time in any area of our life, something else is going to suffer.
Yeah, the story that keeps popping in my mind is one that I think Ed Milet talks about, Alex Hormozy, where at some point when we reach the pearly gates and he envisions conversation with God and talking to him, and like, this is the man you could have been, or 2 different versions could show up, right? To where he imagines, like, if he shows up talking to God, God shows him, hey, this is the man you could have been if you would have done all of those, if you would have followed the framework that we all kind of following, the ought tos and ignoring the want tos, right? If you would have just done that every single day for your whole life, this is the man you could have become. But this is the man that you were, right? And that drives them to just thrive and strive every single day. And I love the story around that, but there's a voice inside me towards, but where's the fun? Like, where?
We'll have a great time.
Right? It's funny because, like, this hustle culture towards, just work 80 hours a week and grind because that's just what you need to do, right? And but when you ask a lot of entrepreneurs, like, what's your hobby? What do you do to unplug and all? And I think that some of that just gets lost in the
Andrew,
pursuit.
what's the point? What is the point in working and accumulating and massing and never enjoying?
Yeah, I feel like that's where I don't hear a lot of conversations on podcasts or from authors or high achievers or the people that model and kind of hold up on that pedestal, where you see the Tom Brady's of life, but then he just went through divorce, right? And you see so many people that
money is not an issue for them, right? He's married to a supermodel that had more money than he did, and he couldn't make it work. He should have retired a long time ago. He missed his opportunity to go out on top, right? And it was for more fame. It was for, give me one more Super Bowl. Let me show you that I can do it, proving himself. And he's missed it. And you can look at him in his eyes. He looks miserable. And so if money did it, if fame did it, he would have it. It's not where it's at. Go achieve, go accomplish, make money. I love to make money. I want to make more money. I just don't want money owning me.
Right.
I want to use the money. My friend, Rabbi Daniel Lapin, he said that money is a tool. We need to look at it as a tool to live the life that we were created to live.
Yeah. There's just so many more questions that I have, but we're running a little bit out of time, which as time is flown.
Well, if we talk much longer, you're going to have me a pizza delivered here at my office. And so, I love talking to you, Andy. This has been fun.
Yeah. So there's 2 questions that I do like to round out every episode with. And the first one is one of my favorites, is what does it mean to be a man to you?
Yeah. Well, I think that there again is the definition that Scripture points out to me, is to be all that you were called to be. It's to be totally reliant and dependent on Christ that leads us, that we get our sustenance from, we get our direction, we have our dependence on. It's very refreshing to me because I don't have to define that for myself. I know exactly what it is by being a Christ follower. And so I can rest in that, and I can be obedient to his leadership daily. So for me, that's what being a man is.
Thank you. So I become a big advocate of baby steps and momentum. So what I'd like you to do is put on kind of your professorial hat, and based on the conversation we've had today, what are some consistent, simple, very bite-sized steps that any man could do over the next 7 days to really feel that momentum, to get them out of stuck, to get them some quick
Yeah,
wins so they can
sure.
start building that confidence back?
Yeah. Yeah. You can go to our website, viewfromthetop.com, and there's some documents that we provide there that will help you with understanding what it is that you want. What do I want? I wrote a document, and there's every phase of your life. You can start with answering those questions, and it's free. There's no charge to it. So just go download that document. And so get with your spouse if you're married. If you're not, then work through it alone. But first and foremost, outline what it is that you want out of life, right? You got to get clear there first, because otherwise you're never going to know if you've won.
Mhm.
That's the first and foremost thing. The second thing is you've got to decide not to have been a victim. Like, I've had some pretty horrific things happen in my life over the course of these 6 decades. And each time I choose to pick myself up and move on. I choose not to be the victim of a dad that was ravaged with alcohol at one time, to a dad that didn't have any financial response in his life. He didn't know how to be an entrepreneur. And I'm not using that as an excuse. There's plenty of education that we can get online. We can be in masterminds. We can get coaches. We can watch TED Talks. We can read blogs. We can listen to podcasts. There's so much education available to us today. So don't let that use you as an excuse. And then finally, adopt the mindset of couldn't do it, but did it all.
Mhm.
And if you disallow yourself from having these upper limit challenges, these glass ceilings, if you push through and you allow yourself to do the necessary work that's required consistently, you too can be very successful and significant.
All right, man. So download that document and start there. Because I think that I was at a guys' weekend a couple weekends ago, and I was talking to other men. I'm like, what do you want out of life? And seeing someone's face, their eyes go up into their head a bit, and they start thinking. And it's one of those questions that I don't know how many times you get asked it, but I would encourage you to ask somebody it, and then start with yourself, one, and two, ask somebody else, and just see where it goes. Because I think it's really fascinating from a connection standpoint and a relationship standpoint,
Yeah.
to where it's like, whoa. And then maybe ask it again. What does that mean to you? And really start getting curious around, once you get past the crap and the stuff and the cars and the money and the bigger houses and the life will get better wins. What if we just started with that and allowing that to be our North Star? Get really clear with it. I really appreciate that exercise and you saying that. So, Big A, where can the men stay connected with you and follow you?
Yeah.
Where should we send them to learn more about you and build this relationship, foster this relationship, and hopefully, join a mastermind, the Iron Sharpens
Yeah, that
Iron?
would be great. If you're listening to what we've talked about today and this sounds interesting to you, we would love to have you complete an application. There's no charge to fill out the application and get with me for 30 or 45 minutes and kind of talk through the application to see if it's right for you. You can go to viewfromthetop.com and an application pops up on the screen. Fill that out. Let's see if you're a good fit. Let's see if we can help you. No ever arm twisting. There's no pressure ever. We want it to be a good fit for us and for you. And so let's look at what that might look like. Also, we do host a podcast. It's View from the Top. So wherever you get your podcast at, go there, download, follow us, and we would love to have more interactions and conversations. We interview some really cool people, and I think you would get some benefit out of that as well. So yeah, viewfromthetop.com.
Awesome, man. Well, check that out. I mean, knowledge, there's a big difference between knowledge and wisdom means that you took action on applying what you actually learned. So what are you going to do with this? Are you going to just give you all the warm fuzzies right now and take it and then forget about it 72 hours from now? Or are you actually going to change something in your life right now? And I hope you feel called to do so. If not, you'll keep experiencing what you've always got, and just stay where you're at. And if that's okay, it's not okay with me, but if it's okay with you, then that's you. So, Aaron, I just want to honor you for a second because I feel so fortunate to have met you. And I am so grateful and appreciative that you decided not to be sitting in the tiki hut with the straw hat on, and that you've decided to take and turn around and pour back into men like me and entrepreneurs across the world, and sharing your experience and your story, because the ripple effect that you are causing and have caused over you investing back into this is going to change the world. So I just really appreciate you.
Thank you.
And that investment.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy. I appreciate those words of affirmation. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Aaron. We've all helped become better men because of it. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Resistingbeta podcast. Here's where I need your help. I'd love for you to give us a review on your favorite podcast player. Also, follow us on TikTok and Instagram, and share this message out to a man that needs to hear it, because that's how we impact this world. Thank you very much. Make it a great day, men.